The machinery's death rattle still hummed in my ears as I stepped out into the half-light. Pink streaks cut through the smoky blue sky above Berlin's industrial east, but I didn't look up. I just stared at my hands. They stank of oil and melted plastic, the sweet, sickly blend of work that clung long after you left the factory. The supervisor had called my name before the shift ended. He spoke with a kind of rehearsed boredom, running a finger down a dog-eared list taped to his clipboard. By last day. Not that he'd said it with any warmth. "We're letting you go, Janik. Nothing personal, just a number shifted somewhere out of a spreadsheet." I almost laughed. The others kept their heads down, able to sniff any whiff of difference and scared of catching it. Outside, my boots scraped against broken glass and wrappers blown against the curb. I hesitated at the fence, glancing back at the looming box of brick and grime. I should have felt afraid or angry. Instead, the ache inside me grew, a dull shame threaded with a strange, stubborn dignity. I turned toward the S-Bahn, past crushed beer cans and lopsided bikes, all the way back to my father's flat. My father was already sipping watery coffee when I let myself in. The kitchen, yellowed by tobacco smoke, smelled faintly of sauerkraut and bleach. Silence thickened as I closed the door. He didn't look up, just tapped ash into a cracked ceramic mug. "Yeah, you're early." He coughed, glancing up at last. "What happened?" "They finished with me," I said, keeping my voice steady. His mouth pressed into a tight line. "So what now? Freeload? Mouthing off about your little sound nonsense?" Here it was, the line cast, tight against my gills, pulling. "No, Vater," I scoffed, setting the mug down harder than he had to. "Be real for once. You're not special. None of us are. You need to find real work, not this, computers and noises. Who even pays for that? No wonder you've got no woman, no house, nothing." I left the kitchen before he could say more. In the hallway, I tripped over my cousin's hand-me-down suitcase and the cheap MIDI controller poking from it. My mother would have said something gentle, but she'd been gone 3 years. Her photo, dust-smudged, watched from the hallway. My brother Lasse was no better. He was my opposite, 6 years older, built like a dock worker, voice like a broadcast. He drove trams and wore his uniform with swagger. On the rare days our paths crossed, he'd grin and nudge me with jokes so sharp they left bruises. That morning, he came by to grab some tools. He saw my gear and shook his head. "Still playing with your toys, Yannick?" He whistled a little melody, my distorted synth loop from last summer, then burst out laughing. "Glaubst du wirklich jemand will diesen Krach hören? You're dreaming, little brother." I mean, my pride kept me upright, but inside every word curled in barbs beneath my skin. I hid out in my room for hours, hunched over dusty hardware, headphones clamped to my head. Each time I opened a file, tried to layer in a new field recording, wind off the spree, subway brakes, the scrape of a match striking. I heard their laughter. I wanted to tune them out, to lose myself in the whirl of resonance and decay, but the shame burned. When evening fell, I took my laptop and controller and went outside, searching for sound. I walked the cobbled streets, passing Turkish grocers bustling with warmth and old women hauling clanking carts. The city's noise was a language, and I wanted to speak it. But even as I crawled under bridges with my recorder or pressed my ear to scaffolding pipes vibrating with distant music, neighbors would shout from windows, "Willst du nicht arbeiten wie normale Leute?" "Get a real job," they said. Some nights I caught my reflection in shop windows, hollow-eyed, hair pressed flat by headphones, clutching a bundle of wires, a joke of a man if I believed them. For a few months, I picked up shifts at a bottle depot. The air clanged with endless glass, the sticky sweetness of spilt cola and decay. I kept to myself, mapping the rhythms of bottles as they hit the belt. Sometimes I'd close my eyes and count beats, training my ear. No one noticed. Home was worse, every dinner. My father started anew. What did you make today, Yannick? More beep-boop sounds? How many euros did that bring? I'd eat in silence, stare at my plate. Lasse once mimed wearing headphones at the table, until even my father chuckled. Humiliation became a fact, as plain as hunger. The worst was at family gatherings. My aunts would crowd the kitchen, clucking over roast goose, and toss me questions that sounded kind, but stung. Yannick, what do you do again? They'd ask, their eyes darting to check on my father's scowl. He's making music with the computer, one would say, as if explaining a child's phase. For video games, yes? Sound design, I'd offer, weakly. Aha, they'd reply, already turning away. One evening, drunk on cheap schnapps at Lasse's birthday, he smacked me on the back so hard my teeth knocked together. Tell you what, little brother, I'll make you a deal. If you can ever pay rent with that crap, I'll eat my hat. Everyone laughed. I smiled too, dryly. But that night, after they drifted home, I stood on the balcony, shivering, and swore I'd never come back until I'd made it. Whatever that meant. I spent most nights that winter making tracks, submitting them to every competition and open call I could find. Rejection emails piled up. One day, I found my father sorting them into a neat stack, like evidence. A person should know when to give up, he said. Don't make a fool of yourself. I let the words slide by me and kept working. Late spring, broke and desperate, I sent a sound library, urban textures, careful edits of railway squeals and festooned subway ambience to an indie game studio. I'd read they needed authentic Berlin city atmospheres. A week later, I heard nothing. Then, late one Friday, a reply flashed into my mailbox. We love your work. Let's talk. My hands trembled as I clutched my phone on the call with them. They wanted me to build their whole game's sound world. It meant money, maybe not much, but enough to leave the bottle depot. When I told my father, he snorted. How long will that last? But I'd been paid. Real invoices, my first euros for something only I could make. The album was small, its credits buried in the game menu, but my name was carved there. Work came in slow, like April rain. I pieced gigs together, sound packs for app developers in Gdansk. Field recordings for an online radio in Stuttgart. I learned to master, finesse, juggle, charm. For the first time, I felt the tug of real possibility. My clients valued things no one else saw. Textures under noise, tension in silence, harmony hidden in machinery. I moved out. The flat was small, 2 rooms off Cottbusser Dam, paint peeling in spots, but it was all mine. I called my father to tell him the number, but he just grunted. When I visited weeks later, Lasse winked and asked if I'd gotten famous yet. That summer, a British director, Maya, reached out. She was making a documentary about GDR ruins outside Berlin. She wanted a sound designer fluent in nostalgia and decay. I obsessed over her requirements, returning to those frozen factory floors at dawn, capturing every whir, rattle, and echo. In the ruins of my old workplace, I pressed my ear to rails and heard deep underneath the heartbeat of the city's past. Maya was thrilled, and for the first time, I stood in a cinema as my full soundtrack washed over the crowd. The applause wasn't only for me, but I felt it ring in my bones. More opportunities came. An ad agency hired me to build an installation for their international pitch, a surround sound walkthrough of Berlin's history in 5 minutes, played live for their biggest clients. The install was scheduled for May, in a high-glass downtown atrium, 2 blocks from my old factory. I was to oversee everything. The night before, nerves caught me again. All I could think of were the sneers, the laughter, the long echo of not enough. I called my father. He answered, voice as gruff as ever. They're playing my work tomorrow. It's important, I managed. You can come if you want. Lasse too. Silence. Then, "You're sure it's not some student thing?" "It's the real thing, I swear." He said nothing and hung up. I spent half the night sleepless, as I always did before a premiere. By morning, the atrium glimmered with light and anticipation. Projectors blinked awake. Massive columns of speakers ringed the hall, each carefully angled. I did a last check, then looked up as the event host ushered guests inside. A mingling crowd filled the atrium, agency execs in sharp suits, artists craning their necks, and, at the edge, two men standing out in cheap coats, awkward. My father. Gray hair wild at his temples, and Lass beside him, cap in hand. I felt an old ache. Their faces were wary, scanning the crowd for jokes at their expense, ready to defend themselves. I forced my way to them. Lass grinned, shifting from foot to foot. "Well, little brother, show us this magic." My father